Ladies and gentlemen, shall we welcome the next speaker for the session, Mr. Mehta. Let us have a nice round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that very generous introduction. It's an absolute privilege and an honor to be here. I'd like to thank my friend Mr. Ajey to have invited me and the distinguished members of City 2.0 and the Malabar Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for having me here. So yes, talking about bridging the divide, this is something that is happening extremely rapidly. We are looking at a phenomenon that we have never seen at least I haven't seen in my lifetime, happening across the country. So let me move ahead here. What I'll talk about is essentially the evolution of disruptive technologies. What is the current status? Where is the future headed to with this connectivity and technology? The benefits of democratization of technology and the opportunities it presents us and it presents MSMEs in the Tier 2, Tier 3 and rural markets of India. I'll spend a minute on the evolution of Industry 5.0. So if you really roll the clock back a few hundred years, Industry 1.0 was all about mechanization in the late 18th century. It brought about industrial cities. It brought about the steam power, the switch from handloom to steam power. The Industry 2.0 was all about electrification. It was in the 19th, 20th century. It brought about assembly line. This was when the internal combustion engine also came about, and Henry Ford actually leveraged this technology to scale his manufacturing up. Industry 3.0, that was all about automation in the 1970s. This was the age of BPOs, of programmable logic controllers in manufacturing, and it was about the computers and the computing power coming into being. Industry 4.0 is what we are going through, and we are actually at the tail end of Industry 4.0, which changed the way we connected and exchanged information. It is about robotics, it's about AR, VR, and all the changes that we are looking at today. But what's going to be interesting now for us to look at is Industry 5.0. That's going to be more about personalization. It's going to be about machines performing complex operations. It's about precise machinery and human ingenuity coming together. It's going to be a collaboration between man and machine. And that's what we're going to see in the next 3 to 5 years. Disruptive technologies have been around for many years. But if I really take you through time again, it took 123 years for steel to hit 80% of the countries around the world. Another 122 odd years for the railways to hit the countries around the world. My industry, mobile devices, we thought we were really quick. It took us 17 years to hit countries, 80% of the countries around the world. Today, if I talk about a disruptive technology like Gen AI, Copilot, which has been launched by Microsoft, it's almost overnight. So what we are seeing today is that there are decades when nothing happens, but then there are weeks when decades happen. And this was brought about during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we were dealing with technologies that were not novel technologies. Those were technologies that were there around for years. But the human behavior changed. So it's a convergence of not only the technology, but it's also the convergence of the human behavior coming to use those technologies. There is a new term that is being talked around, and excuse the jargon I'm using, but I really like this. We live in Barney times. What is Barney? Barney stands for brittle. Brittle means easy to shatter. Today we live in a connected world. We are as strong as the weakest link in the chain. The ripple effect can really take effect. Something can happen somewhere else in the world, and we here sitting in Kozhikode could feel the intensity of that change. So therefore, we are anxious. We are anxious. We fear that we could go wrong with our decisions because everything is not in our control. So there's a lot of anxiety also after the pandemic about the well-being of our well-being and the well-being of our people and employees, and therefore a lot of anxiety. Non-linear. There are things that happen which you cannot explain because the cause and effect relationship is now over. Something can happen in Europe, or say a Ukraine war could result in something very different here and you cannot explain it. There are so many things that cannot be explained. So the whole world is now becoming very non-linear and incomprehensible. And because you don't understand the cause and effect, sometimes you cannot explain why something is happening. It's incomprehensible. It's very hard to distinguish signal from noise because you can't understand what's going on. And AI is making this, in many ways, a little more opaque with the neural networks because you don't know why the results are coming. And sometimes that's the fear that people have, that if it becomes opaque, we lose control. So what is disruption? Disruption is an interruption in the usual way that a system or process or event works. And I love using this example because it's, to my mind, so true. But I think the biggest disruption in recent times is this. The way that Mr. Trump has changed the rules of the game and pretty much made, endorsable something that a few years ago we would absolutely say that it's illegal at some level. But there are disruptions happening at various levels. There's a technological disruption. We've talked about that. We'll talk about a little more of it. There's a social disruption that is going on in India with the rise of the middle class, with the kind of wealth that is being created in India today and the ability of the consumer to pay for the services and therefore the quality of the services that are going to emerge over the next few years. There's going to be a disruption in business models. And that we've already seen. I mean, there are so many brands that have come and gone because business models have changed. So many brick and mortar stores have just shut down because digital technology has taken over and become the main source of trade and commerce. And then there's the geopolitical disruption of essentially the rise of the East. Even 10 years ago, there was not so much rhetoric going on around China, India, and the rise of the East. But today, 70% of what we read, or at least what I read, is all about the rise of the East and how the rise of the East is causing a lot of disruption in the Western world and the way they view the Eastern world. But no matter what disruptions may come, the fact is that it'll always be for the people, by the people, and run and to the people, or whatever the other preposition is, sorry. But it will be something that will be driven by people. People say we will lose jobs, etc. No, I just think that our lives will be better. In fact, I believe jobs will be created. It may be some short-term changes, but jobs will be created, and we need to be ready for it. So whatever the disruption, it's going to be people that are going to be in the middle of it. This is a slide I always show. It, again, is from my world of mobile, of smartphones. And this is a photograph that was taken in 2005 when the Pope was being, where the investiture ceremony of the Pope was happening in 2005. Look how it changed 8 years later. We had 1 million photographers there. And this was the revolution of the smartphone. This was how the smartphone really disrupted all these industries. Imaging for one, you had big brands that disappeared, cameras disappeared, e-commerce the second. Now you have, in some industries, 50% of sales happen online and 50% happen in brick and mortar. And that brings a fresh set of challenges in terms of price parity, et cetera, et cetera. Navigation. The smartphone pretty much is your navigating device. I used to think that navigation will never catch up in India because you can always pull up at the nearest store and ask them for directions. But today, I can't manage without Google Maps because I have to plan my day ahead. And given Delhi traffic, it could take me anything from half an hour to 3 hours to get to my destination. So it's a regular companion for me. Music. Music totally disrupted. CDs gone, the vinyl's gone, tapes gone, iPod's gone. Everything's on the smartphone. And of course, newspapers and books. I still read the newspaper because I guess I'm old, but if I look at the newer generation, very few really read the physical newspaper. They're all getting online or on their phones or YouTube or something else. So the smartphone has disrupted industries, and we've seen changes. We've seen some brands that have very smartly reinvented themselves, like Netflix. Netflix 20 years ago was a company that used to send DVDs by courier from somewhere in California to the rest of the US. Look at the way they have evolved, and they have absolutely transformed themselves. Same with Amazon. They were just a retailer that was a loss-making business, and today they are profitable because of AWS. Some have just disappeared from their stronghold industries. Kodak, for example, Borders, they've just gone out of business because they just couldn't transform fast enough. while new ones have emerged. And the new age ones like WeWork, Swiggy, PayPal, Ola, there are a host of them. I mean, if you go back 10 years, you'll see there'll be thousands of brands that one didn't even hear about 10 years ago and are now currently top of mind for us. So what is this whole impact on India? So digitization of India, the size of the opportunity is what is huge. There are 895 internet users, 895 million internet users in India, with 108% penetration in urban and just 40% in the rural markets. Look at the opportunity. There are 750 million smartphone users, of which 130 million use 5G phones today. And that's going to go up to 860 million 5G users in 2027. There are 200 million feature phone users, so a lot of them are yet to see the internet. And there's the opportunity. In e-commerce, there are 250 million people in 2023 that purchased at least one product online, delivering a value of $100 billion. And of course, the star of India, or I can say the showcase of India, is UPI. There are close to 10 billion, in fact, it's up to 11 billion transactions a month by 300 million users and transacting up to $2 trillion worth in terms of value. I mean, these are staggering numbers. No country, I don't know, China doesn't reveal numbers, but other than China, no country in the world can come close. Look at social media. We are a social media crazy country as well. By far, number one. Again, China out of it because they use WeChat, etc. But if I look at the ones that use Meta products, we are by far number one and growing. So it's a huge story, and there's a lot more that is going to come. So the technology that I believe will be the core technology of driving the democratization of technology is going to be 5G followed by 6G. We have these three categories of enhanced mobile broadband. What does that mean? That means you'll have enhanced coverage, and you'll be able to use more devices. Like in this room, for example, sometimes it can slow down. The speeds can slow down if there are too many smartphones. But with 5G, that will not happen. So you'll have greater capacity, greater coverage. You will have greater scale through massive IoT. You'll have mission-critical services. So examples of that are things like drones, managing hazardous materials with drones. You have e-surgery, et cetera, that will happen with highly reliable, ultra-low latency connectivity. So this is a phenomenon that some of the experts called urbanization, which is rural urbanization. You will find the behavior in the rural markets mirroring that and coming closer to what goes on in the urban markets. And that's what becomes the fundamental of the democratization of technology. So like I said, 5G would be the core technology that would lead digital transformation. But what 5G will act is as a pipe. The real cutting edge changes, et cetera, the tip of the spear, as they say, are going to be these technologies. There's AI, like I mentioned, Gemini, Copilot, these are already starting to take root. IoT, robotics, cloud computing, predictive analytics, these are all there. Everything is there, but it is not as widespread as it will become in the coming days and the coming years. So if I quickly run through, and I'll spend a few minutes on each of these, how will these technologies transform lives for people across India? One is the fixed wireless access. That will take internet to everybody. We will see high quality healthcare at scale, and I'll come to that. I'll just run it through and then I'll come to some of these. Media and entertainment content will be available to all, and personalized, regionalized content will start to emerge because tools will be available in every corner of the country. Democratization of education, increasing financial inclusion. More people will come into the formal credit structure of India. Proliferation of e-commerce to every single corner of the country, leading to deployment of logistics and smart infrastructure. That's going to come over the next few years. And then enhanced public health and security nationwide, and better governance by the government. And let me cover these in a little more detail, some of them at least. So what does fixed wireless access mean? Fixed wireless access means that you will get up to tens of hundreds of gigahertz of speed without having to lay down optical fiber lines. It's going to be over the air. This will be the foundation of the democratization of technology because you don't need to have these fibers running for miles and miles. You can manage over the air, and that's the beauty of 5G. Internet adoption will be in the far-flung areas. You will get higher speeds, better connectivity. This whole thing about remote working will become even more rampant. In fact, an AT&T report says that in 2024, remote work will go up by 81% because it increases productivity, because the connectivity is better, and last but definitely not the least, it is far more cost-effective for the companies today. And companies today are working on very, very thin margins. So that's going to be one fallout. You'll have people who will be working from remote parts of the country. Healthcare. 75% of the population has access to just 30% of hospitalization and hospitals and 16% of the beds, hospital beds. 75% of the of healthcare centers and doctors are in urban India. So what will this fast connectivity do? It will enhance remote diagnostics, teleconsultation. Companies like Practo are already doing it. They are connecting the best doctors, wherever they may be, to the patients around the country. Faster sharing of reports, e-pharmacy, remote surgery. And there's an example of a dear friend of mine who started this company called CureBay in Bhubaneswar, in Orissa. He covers 7,000 villages and with a potential population of 7 million, leveraging a hybrid technology solution, which is as follows. So he uses a robust technology, and I got these slides from him, and I have his permission to share it. Robust technology platform for a seamless journey over the entire life of the patient. And this happens through the platform that he's built. But in addition to this, there is a last mile primary healthcare infrastructure that is also being built. And this is a slightly low cost, low touch. So it's like one room which has a trained nurse, an attendant, and a computer. And he has a tie-up with a pharmacy that delivers the medicines, and with hospitals who can help with the surgery. So it's a hybrid model that has come into play, and he's being able to now do a lot of good in the rural areas of Orissa, and he's actually now looking to expand. Similarly for education. Better education for more children. They say a 10% increase in education results in a 1.1% increase in GDP. So greater reach to the uneducated rural population, more immersive content using AR, VR, giving a more experiential education to the students. And there are some startups like Diksha, which is a digital infrastructure for knowledge sharing, that is working with students in the rural areas and delivering. They're using technology to deliver learning to rural schools in 36 languages. And that's what Diksha is doing. Next, banking. I mentioned this. How many of us go to banks today? How many of us do banking even on laptops? I do my entire banking on my phone. And this is going to get further penetrated into rural India. You're going to find more and more people who are there's going to be more financial inclusion. UPIs we have 300 million users today. Imagine that. There are 750 million smartphone users and only 300 million UPI users who are generating 10 billion transactions a month. Look at the opportunity when that starts to grow and go to the next level. So, huge opportunity for banking in the villages of India, huge opportunity for e-commerce. It will grow, like I said, 250 million shoppers today. In a year, they're looking to grow to 350 million with $175 billion in sales, which is staggering numbers. And this is going to throw up so many opportunities in the rural markets, not only for the consumer, but for enterprise, for MSMEs, for the handlooms, for local artisans, because they will now have a platform that they can sell not just to their regional markets, but to the country. So once you have more consumers coming on board, demand going up, and it just gets into a very virtuous cycle. And with e-commerce going up, logistics is not far behind because you've got to deliver those goods, and expect this also to become a lot more efficient, a lot faster across the town tiers. Right now, it's only up to a certain point. Of course, Flipkart goes to almost 15 to 16,000 pin codes, but the quality of the service, etc., is still leaving a lot to be desired. And those inefficiencies will start to move out of the system, and you will see more and more commerce happening in the lower tier markets. Media, I said, you will have all the tools. You have AI, and you have generative AI, and you have other tools which are used, AR, VR, which will now become a reality in the lower tier and the rural market. So you can have localized content, hyper-local content that artisans and creative people can develop to cater to their the local people there and disseminate it. Think about that. That could be, right now, a lot of it is centrally pushed, and we are seeing moving. You're slowly seeing the shift of, OTT channels like Netflix, etc., that have started to aggressively target us with our, with the regional languages and content that is more regional. But now you will start to see it get even more personalized, more hyper-local, and you will be able to get more people on board to watch that content. So it kind of opens it up. Somebody sitting in some corner of the country who has the ability, the opportunity, the skill, the talent, can actually start to showcase on a world scale. Smart infrastructure, safety, security, smart utility, all these are things that are on a very, very small scale right now, will start to percolate down to the lower tiers. So you will have a lot, things like waste collection, lighting, efficient energy utilization, water supply, citizen services will all start becoming a lot more. While it's already there, it will go totally to the next level. So there are apps like Jugalbandi service, which actually is a chatbot for government services. And what it does is it retrieves information on government services, which is usually in either English or one or two national languages, and then delivers it in the local dialect, right? So they ask the questions in their local dialect, the information is retrieved, and it is given back to them. So that saves a lot. In fact, I'm working with an NGO that is trying to educate, a lot of the government schemes that exist don't percolate down to where they should percolate. They stop at a certain level. So there are a lot of NGOs who are actually working to increase the awareness of some of those government services. So these kind of services like Jugalbandi, and on the back of extremely efficient connectivity, can solve that problem as well. Manufacturing, again, robotics, preventive manufacturing, this can be huge for small-scale industries that operate in our towns, for them to cut down on costs by having, process automation, collaborating possibly with robotics. And mind you, once the scale goes up, right now robotics is a privilege of a few who can afford it. But once the scale goes up, the prices will just collapse. I mean, very much like smartphones. If you remember late 90s, early 2000s smartphones, forget the device, even the connections were unaffordable. But with scale came efficiencies, and the prices were a lot more affordable. Similarly, for things like robotics and things, it will become a lot more affordable as we go forward. Agriculture, higher yield, more profitability. Again, soil monitoring, information, quality of yield based on existing data, best practice learning, tracking livestock. And there are, again, some services like Dehat, which empowers farmers with technology-driven solutions. They personalize their support. They provide agricultural inputs. They provide financial options. They help them cut their costs, raise yields, and therefore drive profitability for the farmer. Therefore, I've just done a quick run-through, and some of it is not alien to all of us, but sometimes we forget the power that still lies ahead of us, the opportunity that lies ahead of us in democratizing all these technologies that some of us have the privilege of accessing, merely because we are in a zone that has fantastic connectivity and access to these technologies. So for the MSME, tapping into local needs, creating businesses, scaling these businesses, having access to business intelligence for the local artisans, for the local handlooms, for the local manufacturers, for the small-scale industry, going to be very, very important. Best practice learning from markets across the world. Not only that, you will have employees working remotely, so better employee productivity, more satisfaction. You'll have access to a larger base of potential employees, because geographical location will no longer be a constraint. You will have last mile, other opportunities are in terms of creating the last mile healthcare infrastructure. It is low cost, but it has a massive impact. So this whole hybrid model can require that kind of a ecosystem. Develop localized media content I mentioned, skilling programs. So things are going to change, and I'll talk about that before I close, that we all need to get into a lifelong learner mindset. We all have to have a growth mindset. So there is the opportunity for us, if we are inclined towards education, to build upskilling, reskilling programs for existing entrepreneurs, existing employees, and so on. It's about building education programs, localizing it, customizing it, even personalizing it. You know, every child is different. We have this broad-based approach to education where we build material and we expect everybody to understand. But with this technology going down and the connectivity becoming bigger, we should be able to personalize education content to the students. There are some, again, services like Karya. Karya, again, has been developed in the Microsoft Research Park. They enlist rural Indians to create quality databases. Now, this is a fantastic use case. So in order to train AI or generative AI, you need to provide them with training data. What Karya does is, with the help of local, people in the rural markets, they are actually creating this training data in the local languages. And as this training data gets built and companies use it, they are turning it into a commercial venture, and they are actually compensating these people to build these models. So it's like a virtuous circle. And through Karya, they are skilling the rural consumers and really making them ready for the next generation of work. And then e-commerce I've talked about. Just one point here, the big boom is going to come in FMCG, fashion, and household. Huge opportunity for local artisans to start to dip into that. And then public utilities, which I talked about. So I won't get into that right now. So the last point here is, therefore, what do we need to do? So like I said, this requires a growth mindset. What is a growth mindset? Growth mindset basically means that people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. So we need to have that agility. We need to be lifelong learners. We need to have the humility to learn, the adaptability to change, and the curiosity to ask questions. And this reskilling, upskilling is going to become very, very important in the coming days and years. So that's basically it. So just a quick summary. I don't know if I've gone over, but we live in a Bani world. Like I said, disruption will only get accelerated with 5G. New technologies will proliferate into the tier 2, tier 3 rural markets, throwing up huge opportunities for everybody, for us as consumers, for us as enterprises, for MSMEs. What we need to keep in mind is that we need to have a growth mindset. We need to upskill, reskill, and ride that curve rather than try to challenge the curve. I think it's a privilege to be witnessing this kind of change in the country. I think the next few years are going to be fantastic. Again, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, open to questions if any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajey Mehta. As you said, it's a privilege to be a part of such rapid growth happening in the country and globally. So open to questions first. Any questions from the audience? Yes. The delegate who had formally asked the question in the first knowledge session itself. Again, with a question in the session.
Yeah, that's what.
Sir, regarding body, brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible.
Yes.
I would like to ask you about the non-linear section, whether the Ukraine war and Russia war, how it affects Kerala's market volatility. Some startups are undergoing market volatility. How
Yes.
the Russian-Ukraine war affects Kerala?
Yeah, so that war can affect us in many ways. One is, of course, and the most important, is the disruption in supply chains.
Okay.
Because of that war, there has been a certain amount of disruption in the supplies of raw materials and in agricultural goods and so on. So I think the single biggest impact of the Ukraine war would be the supply chain disruption, as well as the price of oil, which will cause the cost of goods to go up and cause inflation. Of course, that has been the problem. We've never seen the inflation we saw the last 2 years. We have never seen in 100 years. So these are the two very big impacts, I think, that war can have.
Sir, regarding the e-Bay, in Orissa,
Kyobe, yes.
how they formulate the ideas? Because what I understand is that there is a digital twin of every patient, a digital double of every patient records are kept, and the patient is monitored regularly. His entire medical data is in a database like that of a digital double, a digital twin. Is it that way?
So the way Kyobe works is, say I'm in a village, I fall sick. I go to the Kyobe clinic. There is a nurse and there is an attendant. They will take my vitals of my body, and then they will dial in to a doctor. So the nurse will explain the case to the doctor, and the doctor will then guide the nurse to do further checkups for the patient. And based on that, the doctor will recommend either they go to a hospital or they recommend medicines, and then they will give the prescription, order the medicines, and the medicines will be couriered directly to the house.
Regarding the body also, the brittle is it denoting disruptive technology, brittle?
So brittle is more about being broken easily. What happens today is, because we are so, previously when we had control over most of what happened around our businesses or around our lives. Today we have less control because the world is so connected. Something can happen far away and impact you, and that's why it's brittle.
Is it sort of a butterfly effect?
It's a kind of a ripple effect, yes.
A butterfly fluttering in Kozhikode could be generate a tornado in Brazil.
Yes.
Like that.
It can happen there, and then you will feel the effect here.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Very well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have amazing questions like that. I think he is the perfect example of, having an open mindset, a growth mindset, learning, agility, because usually we expect, no offense, sir, we expect youngsters to ask these kind of questions, but I think he's the person who is listening most properly to each and every point that Mr. Ajey Mehta has said over here. He can even spell out the full form of Bani, which I'm struggling to. Yes, thank you so much for your interesting questions, sir. Any more questions from the audience?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
So you were speaking about how 5G is going to disrupt everything. So what about what we say reverse urbanization? That's people are saying reverse urbanization is happening right now. So would love to know your take on that. How is it happening, or will that be a problem? Or
Reverse organization.
urbanization.
Urbanization.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, actually, that's a very good point. I think the way we should see it is that the gap between the urban and the rural consumers is going to narrow. And you're absolutely right. At some level, the urbanization will also head in the direction of how the rural consumer behaves. But generally, the trend tends to be technology tends to bring more modern infrastructure and modern conveniences to the consumers. So there will be a certain amount of urbanization in rural, and there will probably be some ruralization of urban also. You're absolutely right. So they will meet somewhere in between, but I do believe it will be more urbanization than ruralization, because technology tends to drive a lot more efficient, a lot more modern conveniences, which makes life just easier and better. So, yeah.
Yes, so that's on a positive side. Urbanization, right? Urbanization, the terminology that was coined. We are learning a lot of new terminologies over here. So I believe we've come to the end of the questions. Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much.
Has anybody told you that somewhere you look like George Clooney and sound like George Clooney? No? Nobody. Does anybody feel that? I don't know, when I'm standing from
Please
here, I'm
tell
feeling
my
like
wife
that. Yes, before you leave, sir, we have the chairman of City 2.0, Mr. Ajey K. Anand. I request our chairman to kindly come forward and hand over a small token of our love, our gratitude for coming all the way over here, sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge. If you can go to the center of the stage. And yes, this is the chairman of City 2.0. I think, sir, we can go to the center stage for a nice photo op. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a big round of applause to Mr. Ajey Mehta, the Managing Director and Vice President APAC of Trustonic India and former CEO of Nokia Mobiles, for delivering such an interesting, enlightening session on